sound of strained breathing and the electronic hum of equipment. It's not supposed to be doing this. The pressure readings they're impossible. I'm pulling the drone up now, but it's not responding. It's turning. Oh God, it's turning on its own. It's looking back at me. No, not at the sub. At me. My name is Alara Vance, and for the last 4 years, I've been the ghost that haunts forgotten places. I'm an urban explorer, but my domain isn't crumbling asylums or abandoned factories. It's the deep, dark places the world has drowned. With my custom-built submersible, the Nomad, and my drone, Orpheus, I map the towns and villages sacrificed for progress, lost to the reservoirs and dams that power our world. It was a niche, quiet obsession, until Silversilt. Blackwood Lake was created in 1925, a massive feat of engineering that submerged a valley, and with it, the small, isolated mining town of Silversilt. The official records were sparse, a tight-knit community, deeply religious, who initially protested the dam before abruptly and unanimously agreeing to relocation. There were no holdouts, no dramatic standoffs, they just left. That was the first thing that felt wrong. For a century, no one had seen Silversilt. The lake was notoriously deep and treacherous, with strange currents and a thermocline that played havoc with sonar. It was the perfect challenge. After 3 days of scanning, I found it. The sonar painted a ghostly picture on my screen. A town almost perfectly preserved in the cold, anoxic depths. Houses, a main street, even the spire of a church, all waiting in the crushing dark 1,000 feet below. The first dive with Orpheus was breathtaking. The drone's high-powered lights cut through the gloom, revealing a world frozen in time. A child's tricycle lay on its side on a porch. A general store had its sign, Holloway's Mercantile, still hanging crookedly. It was a silent, beautiful tomb, and I was its first visitor. I spent hours mapping the streets, the drone gliding like a disembodied spirit through the town square. The mystery began with the church, St. Jude's. It was a simple stone structure, but unlike the other buildings, its doors were sealed, not just closed, but barricaded from the outside. Heavy iron braces had been bolted across the solid oak doors. Why would you barricade a church you were about to abandon to the water? My curiosity gnawed at me. I maneuvered Orpheus to a stained glass window. Most were dark, but one depicting a shepherd and his flock had a piece missing, a jagged hole just big enough for the drone's camera to slip through. I eased it in, my heart pounding with a thrill I hadn't felt in years. The interior was a mess. Pews were overturned and hymnals lay swollen and scattered on the floor. But it was the altar that made the hairs on my arms stand up. It was covered in carvings, frantic and overlapping. They weren't Christian symbols. They were spirals, lattices, and complex geometric patterns that seemed to shift and writhe in the drone's light. They made my head ache just looking at them. And in the center of the altar, a single, deep gouge was filled with something dark that hadn't dissolved, even after 100 years in the water. It looked like dried blood. That night, back on my support boat on the surface, I couldn't sleep. The images of the carvings were burned into my mind. I dove into the town's historical archives, cross-referencing names from the census data with relocation records. I found something else that was wrong. The 1920 census listed 312 residents in Silversilt. The relocation records from 1925, signed just before the valley was flooded, listed only 288. 24 people were missing. No death certificates, no records of them moving elsewhere. They had simply vanished from the official account. The next day, I sent Orpheus back down with a new objective: to find the town's cemetery. It was on a small hill overlooking the church. The headstones were draped in a century of silt, but I could still make out the names. I started cross-referencing them with the list of the missing. None of them were there. Of course not. That would be too easy. I piloted the drone to the largest house in town, which the records identified as the home of the pastor, Reverend Alistair Finch. It was a two-story clapboard house, its white paint now a ghostly gray. One of the upper windows had broken, and I guided Orpheus inside. The interior was filled with floating, decayed furniture. In what must have been the pastor's study, I found his journal, miraculously preserved in a thick, wax-sealed leather satchel. Getting the drone's manipulator arm to retrieve it was delicate work. But after a tense hour, I had it on board the Nomad. Surfacing and cracking open that satchel felt like desecrating a tomb. The leather was stiff, but the wax had held. The pages inside were dry, filled with the Reverend's tight, spidery script. The early entries were mundane: sermons, town gossip, worries about the coming dam. But then, the tone shifted. October 12th, 1924. The mining company has gone too deep. They broke through into a cavern that is not on any geological survey. The men speak of a strange resonance, a low hum that they can feel in their bones. Jonas Abernathy came back to the surface complaining of whispers in the dark. He says the rock itself was speaking to him. October 19th, 1924. Jonas is gone. His wife said he walked out of the house last night saying he had to answer the call. He walked towards the mine. We searched. There is no sign of him. The hum is stronger now. Even here in my study, I can sometimes feel it through the floorboards. The entries grew more frantic. More people started hearing the whispers. They became withdrawn, their eyes vacant. They would be seen standing at the edge of the mine, staring into its depths. One by one, they vanished. The Reverend wrote about a growing dread, a sense of a vast ancient consciousness waking beneath their feet. He called it the sleeper below, the echo in the stone. November 5th, 1924. It is not a god. It is a hunger. It does not speak in words, but in patterns. It shows you things, the patterns of your own thoughts, the geometry of your fears. It rearranges you from the inside out. I have seen the patterns. They are in the wood grain of my desk, in the constellations. I see them when I close my eyes. The missing 24. They hadn't vanished. They had answered the call. The final entries were terrifying. The town had descended into paranoia and fear. The Reverend realized the entity was tied to the strange, resonant rock the miners had uncovered. It was weak, its influence limited to those who came in close contact with it. But the dam, the water, he was terrified of what the immense pressure of a new lake would do. He believed it would act as a conductor, an amplifier, spreading the entity's consciousness far beyond the valley. So they made a pact. They decided to perform a ritual, one the Reverend had pieced together from pre-Christian folklore he found in the town's oldest records. It was a ritual of containment. They needed to create a seal, a focal point of psychic energy to keep the entity dormant. The last entry was dated the day before the flood began, May 2nd, 1925. The sacrifice is prepared. We have gathered the artifacts, the resonant stones from the mine. The patterns have been carved into the altar. It is a blasphemy. But I pray God understands that we are acting as his shepherds, protecting the flock from a wolf of an unimaginable kind. The 24 who were taken are not truly gone. They are the conduits now, the first to be remade. We will seal them, and the echo of their minds within the church. It is the only way to silence the song. We have barricaded the doors. The rest of us will leave at dawn. We will never speak of Silversilt again. We pray the water is enough to hold it. We pray we have made the seal strong enough. My blood ran cold. The barricaded church wasn't meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep something in. The 24 missing townsfolk. They were inside, and I, with my drone, had just peered into their prison. A sudden violent shudder rocked the Nomad. Alarms blared. The depth sounder was going haywire, showing the lake floor rising and falling erratically. I looked at the drone's camera feed. The water outside was no longer clear. It was thick with a black, oily silt that was boiling up from the lake bed. And I could hear something, a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated through the hull of the sub. It was the sound I'd been hearing faintly through my headphones for the past hour, a sound I had dismissed as engine noise. But it was growing louder, deeper. It was a hum that I felt in my teeth, in my skull. The hum the miners had heard. Panic seized me. I initiated an emergency ascent, the ballast tanks screaming as they flooded with air. The Nomad shot towards the surface, but the hum grew louder, resolving itself into something more complex. It was a chorus of whispers, 1,000 voices speaking at once, but none of them in a language I could understand. The geometric patterns from the altar flashed behind my eyes. I felt a pressure in my mind, a sense of something trying to get in, to find the shape of my thoughts and rearrange them. I broke the surface in a spray of dark, foul-smelling water. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red light across the lake. I scrambled out of the hatch, gasping for fresh air, my head pounding. The humming stopped the moment I was out of the water. But the silence that replaced it was worse. I spent that night huddled in the cabin of my support boat, every light on, the Reverend's journal clutched in my hands. I didn't dare go back in the sub. I didn't dare look at the sonar. At dawn, I saw it. A single dark object had surfaced about 100 yards from my boat. It was a church pew. Then another piece of wreckage. Then a waterlogged hymnal, its pages spread open like a dead bird's wings. The seal was broken. The pressure change. The drone's intrusion. Something had disturbed the delicate balance. The town was rising. And then I got the first impossible pressure reading on my equipment. An alert from the hydrophones I'd left active on the lake bed. It detected movement. Something large was ascending from the location of the town. Something that was not wreckage. That's when I called for help. I sent a frantic, garbled distress signal, not caring how insane I sounded. As I waited, watching the placid, treacherous surface of the lake, my drone's monitor, which had been on standby, flickered to life. I hadn't activated it. The camera was on. The feed was grainy, distorted by the silt, but it was broadcasting. It was still down there, in the murky ruins of the pastor's house. And it was moving. It panned slowly across the decaying room, the jerky movements not my own. It focused on the broken window it had entered through. And then, a shape blotted out the dim light from the window. It was long and pale, a hand. But the fingers were too long, bending at impossible angles. It wasn't a human hand. It reached through the window, not with curiosity, but with a terrifying, deliberate purpose. The drone's camera tilted up to follow it, and I saw the face that was attached to the arm. It was vaguely human, but its features were fluid, indistinct, as if they were still being formed. It had no eyes, only smooth, pale skin. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my very soul, that it could see me. The feed on the screen distorted, the image tearing as a high-pitched shriek burst from the speakers, the sound of tearing metal and something else. A chorus of voices screaming in unison. Then the screen went black. Signal lost. The hydrophone pinged again. Whatever was coming up was halfway to the surface. The rescue team will be here in an hour. But I know they won't find anything. They'll find my boat, my sub, and they'll call it a tragic accident. They won't know about the journal. They won't know what I've done. I can feel it now, even out of the water. A faint vibration in the deck of the boat. A whisper on the edge of my hearing. The patterns are starting to form in the ripples on the lake's surface. It's learning. It's adapting. It took it 100 years to learn how to influence the water, to break its prison. I gave it a new tool, a drone, electronics, a signal. It knows how our world works now. The sun is almost gone. The surface of the lake is unnaturally still. I'm broadcasting this recording on an open channel. I don't know if it will reach anyone. My name is Alara Vance. I am at Blackwood Lake. I was the first person to see the town of Silversilt in 100 years. I think I see something moving out on the water. It's not wreckage. It's walking. Oh God, it's walking on the water. And it's not alone. There are more of them. The Lost 24. They're coming. Don't come looking for me. Don't come to Blackwood Lake. The silence is broken. The song is free. And it's so hungry.